Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Manatee Springs City Council for October the 4th, 2022. We'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll all join me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Thank you. Would the city clerk please call the roll?
City Council members, Judith Chandler,
Present.
Julie Wolf,
Here, and also I should mention, I was asked by John Shada to request that he be excused because he didn't know if he would make it back from Denver in time, taking care of his mom with his siblings.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Natalie Johnson. Here. Nancy Fortune. Present. Michelle Weatherholt. Here. Mayor John Graham.
Present.
And as we know, Mayor Pro Tem John Shada is absent.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Shada's absence will be recorded as excused. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, Council, you've had a chance to review the agenda. I would look for a motion.
I'll move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Can we have a motion in a second? We'll vote electronically. Please vote.
Six to zero in favor.
Great, thank you. The agenda is approved. Okay, the next item is public comment on non-agenda items. This is the portion of the meeting when anyone in the public is invited to comment on any item that is not on the agenda. Do we have anyone who'd like to speak to anything? Judy, have we had any email contact or anything?
No, Mayor.
Okay. Okay, apparently there's no one wishes to speak to a non-agenda item, so we'll move on. Next item is the consent calendar. Tonight's consent calendar has 4 items on it. First is approval of the City Council regular meeting minutes for September 20th, 2022. Second is approval of the fiber optical installation project. Third, approval of paving contract for Midland and Prospect Place. Fourth, consent to install public art on the Avenue Phase 3 visiting works. If there's anything a council member would like to take off and discuss separately, we can do that. If not, I would entertain a motion to approve and accept.
Move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Okay, let's vote.
Six to zero in favor.
Great, thank you. And for those of you in the audience who came for those items, thank you. It was short work. Okay, next time is presentation, and this is proclamation season. So we have 3 proclamations. The first is proclamation number 1922, recognizing October as Community Planning Month in conjunction with the celebration of National Community Planning Month. I believe Councilor Chandler has that proclamation.
Good evening. This is proclamation number 1922, recognizing Community Planning Month in conjunction with National Community Planning Month for October 2022. Whereas change is constant and affects all cities, towns, suburbs, counties, boroughs, townships, rural areas, and other places. And whereas community planning and plans can help manage this change in a way that provides better choices for how people work and live. And whereas community planning provides an opportunity for all residents to be meaningfully involved in making choices that determine the future of their community. And whereas the full benefits of planning requires public officials and citizens who understand, support, and demand excellence in planning and plan implementation. And whereas the month of October is designated as National Community Planning Month throughout the United States of America and its territories. And whereas American Planning Association endorses National Community Planning Month as an opportunity to highlight how planning is essential to recovery and how planners can lead communities to equitable, resilient, and long-lasting recovery. And whereas a celebration of National Community Planning Month gives us the opportunity to publicly recognize the participation and dedication of the members of planning commissions and other citizen planners who have contributed their time and expertise to the improvement of the city of Manitou Springs. And whereas we recognize the many valuable contributions made by professional, community, and regional planners of the city of Manitou Springs and extend our heartfelt thanks for the continued commitment to public service by these professionals. Now therefore be it proclaimed, the month of October 2022 is hereby designated as Community Planning Month in the city of Manitou Springs in conjunction with the celebration of National Community Planning Month. Now, therefore, John G. Graham, Mayor of the City of Manatee Springs, Colorado, hereby recognizes the month of October as Community Planning Month in conjunction with the celebration of National Community Planning Month.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, and since we have our city planner here, Anna, if you have any remarks you'd like to make relative to this, that'd be fine. Just
Thank you, Mayor Graham. Hannah Van Dimwegen McGuire for the record. Sorry, I wore my loudest shoes today. I didn't expect to speak. But I want to thank the Manitou Springs City Council for their commitment towards city planning. City planning can definitely be one of those topics where it can be very controversial, but we work in our best ability to enforce the public's general welfare, safety, and health. And that can be very difficult to determine. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
great, thank you, and extend our appreciation back through your staff, if you would. Thanks. Okay, next item, proclamation number 2022, American Association of Code Enforcement National Code Compliance Month, October 2022. Natalie?
Whereas neighborhood service officers provide for safety and welfare of the citizens throughout the United States through the enforcement of local codes or ordinances facing various issues of building, zoning, housing, animal control, environmental, health, and life safety. And whereas neighborhood service officers often have a challenging and demanding role and often do not receive recognition for the job that they do in improving living and working conditions for residents and businesses of local communities. And whereas neighborhood service officers are dedicated and highly qualified professionals who share the goals of preventing neighborhood deterioration, enhancing and ensuring safety, and preserving property values through knowledge and application of housing, zoning, and nuisance codes and ordinances. And whereas neighborhood service officers often have a highly visible role in the communities they serve and regularly interact with a variety of state officials, county officials, first responders, legislative boards, commissions, agencies, and bodies. And whereas neighborhood service officers are called upon to provide quality customer service and excellence to the residents and businesses of the communities in which they serve. And whereas the American Association of Code Enforcement wants to recognize and honor neighborhood service officers and professionals all across the United States and bring awareness to the importance of code enforcement to the communities of the United States. And whereas the American Association of Code Enforcement was established in 1988 for the purpose of providing ongoing training and support for code enforcement professionals working in the United States. And now therefore I, John G. Graham, Mayor of the City of Manitou Springs, Colorado, do proclaim the month of October 2022 as National Code Compliance Month and call upon municipalities and communities to join in recognizing and expressing their appreciation for the dedication and service by the individuals who serve as our code enforcement officers, adopted this 4th day of October 2022 in the city of Manitou Springs, El Paso County, Colorado.
Great. Thank you, Natalie. And again, Anna, you're in charge of our code enforcement / neighborhood services person. So if you'd like to comment on that.
Thank you again, Mayor Graham. We have one neighborhood services officer who works pretty tirelessly to ensure that codes are being complied with, and that can be a very difficult job. So we appreciate her service. She wasn't able to be here tonight, but I will make sure she knows that her work is appreciated.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay. Now our third proclamation, Proclamation 2122, recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day in Manitou Springs. recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day in Manitou Springs and recognizing the rededication of the Ute Trail in the Mineral Springs. Whereas in 1912, Ute warriors rode horseback over their traditional migration route into Manitou Springs to formally dedicate the Ute Indian Trail and to commemorate its importance as the passageway between the mountains and the plains. And whereas this valley was a place of pilgrimage for the Utes and other Native peoples who venerated the mineral springs as places of spiritual power and peace. And whereas the Ute Indian Trail remains an important recreational, cultural, and historic asset that enhances the quality of the life of our community. And whereas the mineral springs are an intrinsic source of pride and identity for the people of Manitou Springs. And whereas the people of Manitou Springs cherish these amenities and take great pleasure in recognizing the importance of the Native cultures as part of our history and identity. And whereas we highly value and appreciate the goodwill of the Ute people, the host nation, in rededicating both the Ute Indian Trail and the mineral springs. And whereas we wish to honor all the Indigenous peoples and extend our friendship to them and to have them share with us the great beauty of this valley and the mineral springs. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Manitou Springs City Council hereby proclaims Monday, October 10th, 2022 as Indigenous Peoples Day and sets aside the weekend of Saturday, October 8th through the 10th for its celebration. We call upon all our citizens to recognize and celebrate the culture and contributions of the Indigenous peoples to our community. Dated this 4th day of October, 2022 in the city of Manitou Springs, Colorado. And as I look out into the audience, I don't see any of the other members of the Indigenous Peoples Committee, so I feel free to make a commercial announcement. So this weekend, Indigenous Peoples Day, we have some nice community events. I would encourage you all to come and enjoy them. First Saturday night, right here in this room from 6 to 9, we'll have a meet and greet for the Native peoples. I heard today that we'll have 7 nations represented. The Utes will be taking the lead since they're the host nation, but we'll also have Arapaho, Cheyenne, Lakota, Apache, Comanche, and I'm not sure the 7th. Then we may have some others too, but those will be here officially. Then on Sunday at 10 o'clock in front of the Manatee Spa building, you may be familiar with the boulder there that commemorates the 1912 ride. We'll be having 3 Utes come down on horseback and they'll rededicate the trail. That's at 10 o'clock. At 11, we'll be over at the 7 Minute Spring. They're going to rededicate the mineral waters. Then at 1 o'clock, we'll be back in this room and we're going to have a potluck. And Lynn Harwell is going to make a big pot of Indian stew. So that'll be sort of the centerpiece. It'll be a fun thing. It'll be a great thing for kids. There'll be some drumming with Red Spirit drummers. And I think we're going to have some ceremonial dancing as well. So tell your friends, make a day of it. Thank you. It's only going to be in Manatee. I mean, Manatee is the only place on earth that can claim this. You know, the Utes, the location, the passageway to the mountains. So when we think we're special, I mean, this is certainly one of the reasons for it. Good. Next item, discussion of City Code 946 sit lie and 1232 obstruction, 2 ordinances. So we've got Alex Treefy, our public information officer, and Chief Bill Otto from the police department.
Good evening, Mayor Graham, Manatee Springs City Council. My name is Alex Treffry. I'm the Public Information Officer for the city. So just as a quick prelude, in June of 2022, there was a proposed ordinance that amended the sit-lie ordinance, which is ordinance number 2416 and Municipal Code 9.46. When that ordinance was voted down on second reading, it was requested that it is brought back and brought back for discussion. So that is what we are doing today. This will be a short presentation with a few brief videos just to kind of help demonstrate what the differences are between our sit-lie ordinance and our obstruction ordinance. Oh. So first off, just to clarify for everyone, so we're all on the same page. Ordinance number 2416, which was codified to Municipal Code Chapter 9.46, the sit-lie ordinance refers to prohibitions on sitting, lying, and displaying items. And then ordinance number 2716 codified to municipal code chapter 12.32. The obstruction ordinance refers to prohibitions on obstruction. So I just wanted to lay that out because there's a lot of ways to refer to it. And so for some brief history on this, the city used to have a panhandling ordinance, which was repealed because it was deemed potentially unconstitutional by the city's legal counsel due to ongoing Supreme Court cases across Colorado and the United States. And so we, as well as many other cities, transitioned over to a sit-lie ordinance, which is what we're discussing. One such city is the city of Colorado Springs. So they also transitioned over to a sit-lie ordinance. That was enacted in 2016, and it is currently in place. And we'll go into what that means, what the effects of that ordinance are. And then in addition, there's the obstruction ordinance, which was originally enacted in 1974. And then it was amended in 2016, and that is also in place. So both the sit-lie and obstruction ordinances are in place. And so then just to go into the effects of these ordinances. So the sit-lie ordinance regulates behavior in the downtown area. The original wording is it's intended to preserve safe and unimpeded pedestrian and vehicular traffic. I apologize. The original wording is increase pedestrian safety, thereby making the downtown area more hospitable to residents and visitors and promote economic vitality. That's the original wording of the ordinance when it was passed in 2016. But essentially what it does is it prohibits sitting, lying, and displaying items in the downtown area, which on the map in the PowerPoint presentation is outlined in yellow. What the obstruction ordinance does is it regulates behavior on sidewalks, alleys, roads, etc. It has a lot more gray wording, and it states it prohibits impeding pedestrian or vehicular traffic in these stated locations. It's meant for keeping a free flow of traffic, however that's viewed. And so then I have a hopefully helpful Venn diagram to sort of explain the differences here. So the sit-lie ordinance pertains to the whole downtown area, whereas the obstruction ordinance pertains to sidewalks, alleyways, roads, etc. The sit-lie ordinance, as stated earlier, prohibits sitting and lying and displaying items in the public right-of-way, whereas the obstruction ordinance, what it's prohibiting is rendering sidewalks, alleyways, roads, etc., impassable. In addition, the sit-lie ordinance prohibits traditional street performing. And so to talk about that, because this is kind of how this whole discussion came about, there is no reference to street performing in either of these ordinances. The sit-lie ordinance prohibits behavior that's common with street performing, right? And that's the sitting, lying, displaying items, etc. In neither of these ordinances is street performing or any real activity besides sitting, lying, and displaying items even mentioned. The obstruction ordinance, it depends on a case-to-case basis, but it does, in most scenarios, permit street performing, if that makes sense. I mean, if it's a busy day and someone's street performing in the middle of the sidewalk, probably not. But if they're, away from the passage of traffic, it's probably permitted. It just depends. But with that said, the obstruction ordinance, it's not just street performing. So that would, if someone was able to street perform in that location, then essentially, talking very high level here, they would also be able to sleep there, display items, sit there, etc. Because again, it doesn't directly mention street performing. So then at the bottom there, maybe it's kind of intuitive already, but the CIDLI ordinance has a large sphere of influence. It's very impactful. It has a lot more teeth than the obstruction ordinance. The obstruction ordinance, although it is important, it is less impactful in terms of how much it regulates. But with that said, both of them are intended to create a better environment in Manitou Springs. That's the intention behind each ordinance. They just work a little differently. So then I have two videos to show. We're not going to show all of them. But at the last meeting, there were a lot of questions about why the CIDLI ordinance could be considered important and what effects it actually has. So we went back to friendly YouTube. Sorry, I just need a quick second. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm trying. There we go. So we went back to YouTube. Both of these videos are from 2015. We'll watch the entirety of this one and then briefly the other one. But it's to kind of show what the CIDLI ordinance does and what it doesn't do. So I believe this is only a minute long or a minute 40 long. So we'll just watch this quickly. Again, this is from 2015, a year before the passage.
Well, loitering in Manitou Springs is a big concern, so much so, the issue will be front and center at 2 city meetings tonight.
And the city council and a park task force will hear complaints from merchants about an increase in homeless people, panhandlers, and vagrants.
KRDO News Channel 13, Scott Harrison explains the problem in a story that's new at 5.
Laura Heinzman and her boyfriend moved to Manitou Springs 2 months ago. They say they're homeless by choice and have had a mixed reception.
Well, I think some of the business owners like us, and I think some of them don't. A lot of them don't like the image that we put on the town.
And here's how much of that image looks. Aggressive panhandling, asking passersby for money, even while intoxicated. At Soda Springs Park, someone even made a clothesline.
Or the ones that are doing their laundry or taking a bath in the creek, you know, those are the kinds I don't really want my kids around.
It's a disturbing trend for some business owners. We spoke with 3 of the business owners who seemed to be most concerned about this situation. All of them declined to speak on camera, partly because of what they say are the politics involved, and also because they fear retaliation from some homeless people who may break out their windows or smear their buildings with graffiti. Not everyone who hangs out here causes problems. After all, Manitou Springs is known as a place for free spirits. But several merchants say there are simply too many panhandlers and vagrants scaring away customers and tourists. In Manitou Springs, Scott Harrison, KRDO News Channel 13.
And merchants are asking for more police involvement.
3 days only. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Save thousands on
We don't
hot tubs
want
and swim spas. Trade-ins welcome. Free delivery. We'll even haul away your old spa.
Can you pause it for me, man? I'm having trouble with the
Colorado
mouse.
Springs Event Center. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Cool, thank you. And so one thing I want to mention is, and I failed to mention it before, so I apologize for that, but CIDLI ordinances in general are widely considered anti-homeless. And that's just part of it. That's part of the perception of them and things like that, because a lot of the time the behavior they regulate is the behavior of transient folks and homeless individuals. So I just want to be transparent with that. We aren't taking a side on what the right decision is here. We just want to present the facts of it. Here's another video from 2015. Please disregard the title. They definitely are not violating this individual's rights. But what I do want to show you is just certain things throughout the video that the obstruction ordinance does not regulate, that the CIDLI ordinance does. So here, this is by the, I'm forgetting the name, the Cheyenne Spring, I believe. It's by Patsy's, right in between like Patsy's and the Mate Factor almost. So as you can see in the center of the screen here, there's a street performer here playing, I believe that's a saxophone. And they have a saxophone case sitting out here. They're pretty tucked away. So with the obstruction ordinance, this would be allowed. With the CIDLI ordinance, this would be considered displaying an item. So it would not be. And then I will go forward a little bit. Again, this video was from 2015. It's about the only thing that we had to kind of show what it was like before the sit-lie ordinance. So here you can kind of see it. I could probably get a better angle, but on this planter here, I believe that's a street performer, and sitting next to that gentleman is also another street performer from another angle. And so what they're doing is both sitting on the planter and playing a guitar. Maybe I can show a better angle. Sorry, I apologize. Give me a quick second. Oh, sorry, the mouse isn't working the best. But I can display the video, but you can see them back there. There's multiple people on the planter sitting there, which, can you pause it for a minute?
And the condition of those two girls who were shot. Chris.
And you can stop sharing the screen. But those individuals sitting on the planter, that would not be allowed with the sit-lie ordinance because that would be considered public right of way. But with the obstruction, it's fair to say they're probably out of the way of the free flow of traffic. So that would be allowed. I'm hoping that clarifies things for y'all. We're here to answer questions. Last time Jeff Parker was remote, there are some connection issues, so he's definitely here to answer questions as well. And he probably knows a lot more than myself. And we also have Chief of Police Bill Otto to answer questions as well, maybe regarding enforcement, things like that. So if you have any questions, please let me know.
And I would just mention to council that we're not looking for a decision tonight. This is essentially an information presentation. I think going back the last time we visited this, there were some outstanding questions. So this provided an opportunity for Alex, the chief, and for Mr. Parker to provide that. So it's a good time to ask questions and learn things, but we don't have to make a decision tonight. That's right. Julie?
Not as a question necessarily, but just as a discussion item. I believe where we left off was that we weren't necessarily wanting to completely do away with the sit-lie ordinance, but we were really struggling with how to carve an exception in there to allow street performing. And then we got sort of micromanaging or in the weeds with identifying specific locations where the street performers would be allowed to perform. And if they weren't performing there, then they would be in violation of the law. And then some of the business owners weren't too pleased about if their business was located really close to the location that was identified for the performer, because they just thought, oh, the music isn't very good. It could be bad for business that day or something. And then it all kind of crumbled apart. So personally, where I'd like to see this go is to maintain the sit-lie ordinance. I think it's important to keep people from sleeping and obstructing our sidewalks and such. And at the same time, I'd like to find a way to permit street performing in a manner that works both for the businesses and the residents. Some of the, I mean, there were so many details last time about you can only be there for 2 hours or 4 hours, or my God, it got very involved. But personally, I don't want to see it go away for the reasons that have been demonstrated here today, is that the obstruction ordinance is just so limited. So if somebody is nicely trying to sleep on the sidewalk just on the corner, and a wheelchair actually could still pass through on the sidewalk, that would be something I would not like to have people sleeping on the sidewalk, even if they weren't officially obstructing it. And so that's why I hate to see us completely do away with the sit-lie ordinance. That's just my feeling about it.
Okay. Thank you, Julie. Nancy.
Yeah, my sense is that the sit-lie ordinance is also for the safety of the individuals who are choosing to sleep on the sidewalk. It's not necessarily safe for them to do that, as well as the fact that they might be obstructing. So a couple things. I would ask the chief how difficult it is to, I'm sorry, the last time we got together, we had said we would ask you to make citing street performers as a low priority. So how has this direction impacted your ability to enforce or not enforce the sit-lie policy?
Best of my knowledge, we haven't cited anybody for it since we last spoke. Placing a low priority on it, I guess. I don't know how we can do that. I mean, all circumstances and situations are different. So I couldn't tell you that we would put it at the bottom of our list or put it at the top of our list. Again, what we would like to do is to be able to tell people, hey, you can't do that here, or you can do this here, and have them comply. But each person we talk to is going to be different. Some comply with us and do what we ask. But then you have other people that won't do that. It's kind of tough.
Yeah, my sense was, and I certainly don't want to go back to the days of 2015 and 2016 because it was pretty not pleasant to say the least. My sense is that the community had asked the city to come up with a way to allow street performers, which really technically are not allowed under the sit-lie policy. I think made a yeoman's effort to do that. And it seems like it's still difficult to properly enforce it and have street performers. So I would agree with Julie Wolf that I think we still need something because it just is too confusing for the street performers, the businesses, and the police to know when, where, how, and why things are appropriate or not appropriate. So that's kind of where I am. I think we still have work as a city to do on this. Because this much gray area is going to cause problems at some point, I believe. Thanks.
Okay, Michelle, I think you beat Judith to the draw, so we'll do Judith next.
So I think we just need clarification because there's a gentleman that performs in front of the Congregational Church and he's out of the way. But yet the other day there were people performing in front of Manatee, adults and children, and it could have been seen as obstructing because you're having to weave yourself through the sidewalk to get inside Manatee or to get over to Soda Springs Park. Whereas in that second video that we saw, they could have performed there and not be obstructing the sidewalk.
So I can provide a little clarification. It's hard to understand and it's hard to explain, mainly because currently the sit-lie ordinance is not being enforced fully. And our police are so busy, right? It's not like they're sitting out there waiting for it. But let's say they were. If we were enforcing the sit-lie ordinance as we wanted to, with full teeth and everything, then you would not be able to street perform whether you're out of the way or not in the downtown area, mainly because, well, you could, but if you were sitting down and doing it, or you wanted to put a hat out for donations or something like that, regardless of it, if you, per that PowerPoint presentation, that map with the yellow shaded area, if you're within that area and you're doing the standards of street performing, which include setting an instrument case down and playing music while sitting down, that's really not allowed with the sit-lie ordinance, which we have in place right now. Does that clear things up? Thank you.
Judith?
Yeah, when we discussed this in a prior council meeting, I really had trouble wrapping my head around really what was our motive and what was our intention with the street performance ordinance. I think street performers are fantastic. I think that they, for the most part, provide a really wonderful entertainment service to Manatee and help define us as one of our core values as a town. On the other hand, we need to balance this health, safety, and welfare of our residents, business owners, and visitors. And so one of the frustrations I had was that the street performance ordinance just seemed to get so bogged down in little particulars that I just couldn't wrap my head around it. It was just way too restrictive. And so in my perfect world, what I would love to see is law enforcement and some street performers come together in a work session. And because we didn't really, I don't know enough to know what is the best balance. And I think we need some stakeholders in the room to tell us, to inform us. And I do think we do need a policy. And I appreciate you helping us through the difference between these two. I think there's a lot of overlap with these two ordinances, and that, that can maybe be corrected as well. But I appreciate this as a beginning. But if we could do a work session where we have some stakeholders in the room and we talk about it, and each person on council has a really well-grounded understanding of what it is we need to, the problem we need to solve, and how we're going to get there. That's the direction I'd like to go.
Thank you. Natalie, did you have anything?
I don't really have anything to add aside from the fact that we do need to continue this conversation. I know initially you reached out because you wanted help clarifying some of these, what are we asking you to enforce or not enforce? And we didn't really help clarify anything. So I do think we need to move forward with this conversation.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, go ahead,
Yeah.
Julie.
Do you like the idea of a work session where we invite some performers in and get feedback from them on what would work for them, and then have representatives of the police department let us know if that seems doable? What do you
Well-
think about that
Well,
proposal?
I think going back to the last time we visited this, I think Alex and the chief spent a fair amount of time with some of the street performers and talked about that. I know I probably had about 3 hours overall talking to different street performers and whatnot. Alex, have I got that correct? Did you guys spend some time talking to folks, or?
Yeah, definitely. We definitely engaged some folks for sure. It's just, I think that working together to find something would be absolutely great. What I do want to mention though, right, to make sure that it's clear why we proposed the ordinance that we did, is because what we wanted for the police department and for a street performer who wants to know what our rules and regulations are, is we want them to be able to go online, visit our code, and understand it, right? Because right now, if a street performer goes on our code and they say, what are the street performing rules in Manatee Springs? They'll get a wrong answer because they're going to say, I can't do anything right now if they read the SILI ordinance. So what we wanted was something that was extremely black and white. It did get bogged down, definitely. I definitely understand that in hindsight for sure, but that's what we were looking for. But that doesn't mean that that's the answer that we need. But just so everyone's aware, that's why we proposed that, is because it was very clear what was and wasn't allowed. But as I said, maybe that's not the correct approach. So I just wanted to bring that up.
And if I remember correctly, you had done, some of your research was based on an ordinance in, I think, Las Vegas. Not that we think that Nevada is necessarily guidance for us, but they had worked through a lot of this. And I think they had some concerns about First Amendment rights and so forth. So it seemed like they had done their homework, and we were going to try and benefit from that to some degree. But again, it's a murky area. And I know the buskers that I talked to, it seemed like by and large, they kind of had a system that worked. They did some self-regulation. Now, that only goes so far. There's a day when everybody wants to compete for the same spot, I suppose. And by establishing those little territories, we were sort of probably creating a mechanism that would make them, set up some competition. at the risk of making things more complicated than less complicated, I guess I also have a question about solicitations. My understanding now is if you go by the town clock, you're going to be asked to contribute to fight puppy mills. And I've also, I got a complaint from a citizen. It was on a Sunday. Somebody had religious books in one of our parks and they were accepting donations for the books. And I think they were kind of aggressively trying to make transactions. So there's not a simple answer. I think we all understand that. I guess the good thing is now that we're coming into fall, there's probably going to be less as we get into the winter months, maybe less performing. That may be a reckless remark for me to make. Okay, Nancy, come up with a good answer.
Yeah, I wish that I just, that would be nice. I would recommend that we not do it in council work session, just because I think that we'll tend to complicate things further. I would like, but I do think that having the police, Alex, some good representatives from street performers, because I'm a supporter of street performers, and the businesses, because the businesses are definitely impacted by this as well. And to maybe come back with a lighter hand than the last ordinance, and then see how it goes. Because again, my concern is that there's just too much gray area and people don't know what they can and cannot do, or when they should be calling the police when something is really bad, and or when it's inappropriate to call the police, and so on and so on. So that would be my recommendation, rather than actually doing it in a city council work session. I would like to see them bring a product that those three groups might come to some consensus on.
Okay.
May I ask what you found out when you met with the different musicians? Because it seems to me that trying to generalize how musicians would like the code to read may be unrealistic. Different people have different views. I know I spoke with one person who thought the 4-hour maximum was a great idea. Then the police pointed out, how on earth are we supposed to keep track of when the person arrived, when they lived? And I talked to someone else who thought that was crazy, and no one usually plays more than 3 hours anyway, because you get tired. And, so I mean, we can look at maybe trying to simplify things so that it works. It's easier to implement and not quite so detailed. Whether that's a work session or an informal meeting, that doesn't matter to me. But I wondered did you get any feedback on how they felt about us putting them in certain locations for certain time slots?
I don't, I think they were a little negative on that, but I don't think they were too vocal on that part. I think the message they wanted to give me was that they could self-regulate a lot of that they kind of worked out amongst themselves. Now, you could say the same thing works with in a lot of situations where, you let kids play by themselves and that works for a while. And then, somebody competes for the same toy or something for the same space. So I don't think it would work all the time, but it did seem to me like a certain amount of self-regulation could be expected, and that might help. And then in that case, the police have to step in the exceptional cases now. And I'm not saying that I have anything near an answer, but I was also trying to think, how can we do this so people have as much freedom, everybody, across the board, and at the same time not burden the police. Let's try and make this make simple, and let's not try to find a problem where there isn't a problem and make a bigger problem out of something that's a small problem. And again, I don't have an answer. I think we all understand that this is such a murky area.
I would think they could self-regulate the duration of their performing, not necessarily the location. I think the police we need to be pretty specific about that, I would guess.
Location. And I mean,
Yeah.
when we talked about, say, using the north side of Manatee Avenue, well, one of their comments was, that gets awfully hot there in the summertime, and we've had a bitterly hot summer this year. So I don't know how well that would have worked, even if we had adopted the previous proposal. Okay, Judith, you're going to have the perfect answer.
I don't have the perfect answer. I may have the perfect question. Who knows? So obviously, if this was easy, we wouldn't still be talking about it. We would have done something about it. And for everyone who was at the previous meeting, I mean, for every business owner there was that didn't want the street performer close by, there was a business owner that wanted them right by their front door. And, and there were some street performers that were okay with parts of the proposed ordinance and street performers that found that way too restrictive. So I guess my question is actually to you, Counselor Fortune. I wanted to clarify what you were proposing. Are you proposing that members of law enforcement and the members of the business community and some staff and some street performers get together independently and then bring something to us? Is that what I heard you say? So I guess my question is that something, Chief Otto and Alex, given your experience, that you think that would be beneficial and then that could happen?
Well, I can speak for the police department. Well, first of all, it's not necessarily what the police department wants. Back to the previous discussion a few minutes ago. It's what the community wants and the city council wants. We'll enforce whatever ordinance law that we have to that's on the books. And I am not opposed at all to a workshop, if you will, with the police, the business owners, the musicians, members of the community. Not at all. I just wanted what the police want. It does matter. I'm a cop, but it's got to come from the community and everybody else. I mean, we'll enforce what's on the books.
So Alex, can you weigh in on that question?
Yeah, it's definitely doable. I mean, I think in my opinion, in scenarios like this, where you're kind of gridlocked, bringing everybody together and finding out the commonalities is probably the solution. So I can make it happen.
If council hasn't any objections, perhaps that would be the way to go then. Okay, I'm seeing head nods. Gentlemen, I guess that's what we'd like to see happen. If you can maybe get together and let's see what we can come up with. I'd also ask, is there anyone in the audience who wants to speak to this? Okay, if there was a bright idea out there, I wanted to hear it. So I guess we don't have any takers there tonight. So, okay, guys, we appreciate the work you've been doing on this. It's not simple, obviously. So thank you. We appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item, it's a hearing. It's a major conditional use permit 2203. Major conditional use. It's a mobile food vendor at 27 Manatee Avenue, Holly Carpenter applicant.
Good evening. I'm Chelsea Stromberg, Senior Planner. The applicant is respectfully requesting a continuation to December 6th, 2022 in order to further evaluate parking impacts.
Can you get a little bit closer to the microphone? Probably about 3 inches or so. Thank you.
The applicant is requesting a continuation to December 6th of this year to further evaluate parking impacts. And I apologize for the late notice. We did receive some last minute information that led to this request.
Oh, okay. So you're requesting a postponement.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, excuse me. Councilor Fortune has a question.
Just this is for the food truck one, right?
Correct.
Okay. So this is unrelated to the conditional use permit. At one point, we were informed that Emerald Fields and the city were working together to change the entry sign to Emerald's Field to help prevent. And I just wanted to know if it doesn't look like anything was done with that. So I just wanted to follow up on that. So that should probably be during council correspondence, but it seemed like a convenient time to bring it up now.
I I can certainly look into that and bring an update to the December 6th hearing.
Yeah, or you can just email me sometime. That would be fine.
Okay.
Thanks.
Julie?
I'd like to make a motion to postpone to December 6th.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, we have a motion to postpone till December 6th. Okay, please vote.
Six to zero in favor.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And just to clarify for the record, it would be at 6 o'clock or later. Just so we have the time right as far as the postponement's concerned too.
Okay, to be more specific, very good. So postpone to 6 o'clock or later on December the 6th.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Parker.
Thank you.
It's a Tuesday. Okay, very good. Thank you. Next item is a major conditional use. It's a wireless service facility on a non-eligible facility at 125 Higginbotham Road. Katie Maklowitz applicant. We have our planning director here.
Thank you, Mayor Graham and members of City Council. We are requesting another postponement, this time to November 15th. The applicant is working to address the concerns and questions that were brought up at the initial meeting, and that is not ready for a presentation just yet.
Okay, in light of that, I'd entertain a motion from council.
I'll move to postpone major conditional use permit 2022, major conditional use for wireless service facility until 11/15/22 at 6 PM or later.
And we have a second from Counselor Wolf. Okay, let's go ahead and move. Judy, if you enable the voting, okay, let's vote.
6 to 0 in favor.
Great, thank you, Hannah. Sorry, Judith? Oh, okay, there's been a request for a brief break. Let's take 10 minutes, so about 7:05.
You think I jinxed you? You think I jinxed you? I jinxed you? You think I jinxed you with that? I should know better.
Okay, if we can get back to business, please. Thank you. Okay. So our next agenda item is discussion of the new Mesa water treatment tank, or the update on that. So Dole, I guess.
Good evening, council. We're here tonight to talk about the Mesa tank, the new Mesa tank update. I have Gwen Dahl with me tonight from JDS Hydro. They did most of the analysis in the presentation. We've been working with them on this. I do want to highlight, this is fairly technical. We welcome questions. There's a lot of variables to this. And so there's a lot of things that they speak that don't always make sense to all of us. So feel free to ask. I also want to point out that kind of the goal of this tonight, I think with a high level of confidence, we as city staff in partnership with JDS Hydro know where we think the proposed tank should go. And we think we know the elevation and the diameter of it for storage capacity wise. But the rest of that presentation really is kind of about the material type. Each material has a positive and a negative. And so it's kind of so Gwen's going to go through and kind of show how we got to the tank sizing, and then has additional information on the materials and the benefits of each of those different types, which I'm hoping you guys have all had a chance to review. So Gwen, it's all yours.
Okay. And Gwen, if you give us your full name and your title, please.
Yes, Gwen Dahl, and I work for JDS Hydro, which is a division of RESPEC, and I'm an engineer.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you for allowing me to give the presentation and taking time to listen. I appreciate that. Just as a review, this presentation, you can flip to the next slide. I guess we lost the mouse. Basically, this presentation outlines our review of a second tank adjacent to the existing Mesa tank, and reviews options that we considered together with your operations team for volume, dimension, and material of this tank type. We go to the tank location. This is just a quick picture here on the slide, just to speak to the tank location. The master plan that was completed for the city in 2017 did speak to some other locations potentially for the tank. One was right next to the Mesa tank, and the other two locations were next to the water plant. So again, this presentation focuses on, the one next to the Mesa tank, but there was other locations considered as part of that master plan. So now we'll talk about tank types. So the first tank type to talk about is what your existing tank is, which is a welded carbon steel tank. I think yours is the one on the top, and there's another picture there of a welded steel tank. Your existing tank is installed in 1965. It's about 57 years old. It has a flat roof supported by 7 interior steel columns. And currently the tank is in need of repair, including interior recoating. And in order to do a recoating on the interior of your tank, the tank needs to be taken out of service. And it has to be empty for probably at least several months in order to complete that process. Generally, coating on a welded field tank is field applied, as would be the case when you rehabilitate your existing tank, rather than factory coated. So this really is, of all the tank materials, requires the most ongoing maintenance.
Gwen, let me add to that too. So when we talk about recoating the tank, you basically have to go in and sandblast, scrape all the existing coatings on the inside of the tank, and then reapply like an epoxy based product. The nuance of this is that you have to have ambient temperatures appropriate for that new applied coating to cure. JDS Hydro has horror stories of people trying to do this in the wintertime because you're using less water. So let's go do it in the wintertime. And then you don't get that exothermic reaction and it doesn't cure. And they have actually had to go through and scrape and recoat again. So it sounds simple. We got to take it offline or recoat it. The problem is we got to do it in June, July, August, which also happens to be our highest usage months. And so that really is what added a lot of volume to where we are today and what this presentation is. So I just think that's an important nuance, is the importance of that ambient temperature when recoating the old tank.
Is it like paint? Needs to be like 50?
Yeah, it depends on the specific type of coating that the manufacturer is using. And of course, the season of how warm of a winter you get, but yeah, in general. Okay, so now we'll move to the next type of tank. This is a bolted steel tank that you're seeing a picture of here. This is another type of steel tank. The difference with it is that it has a factory applied coating. And so that factory applied coating has a longer lifetime, before it has to be recoated. And the other advantage of this particular type of tank is that it is shipped ready to fabricate, and it's very easy and quick to put together. I don't know how many of you have been up to the Mesa Tank site, but it's a very tight footprint with a very difficult road to navigate up to it. So this type of bolted steel tank does have a lot of pros in your particular situation because it is easy to construct in a tighter footprint. And then it has the advantage of having that factory applied coating such that it would have a longer time period between recoatings on the tank. So there's a couple of type of coatings that can be applied on these tanks. One is the fusion bonded epoxy and one is glass fused. In general, the fusion bonded epoxy is probably a bit more favorable because it can be recoated. The glass fused coating has a longer a longer lifespan, lasts longer, but once it reaches the end of its lifespan, that's it. You can't do anything with it. You have to build a new tank, basically. Where the epoxy coated, you can recoat and extend its life.
Are you allowed to recoat more than once on the fusion bonded version?
Yes, I believe that you could do that.
Keep doing it.
Yeah, I mean, at some point it would reach the end of its life. When I talked to the tank vendor, they have a life expectancy of 60 to 70 years, but it could go longer. Okay. So I did a quick picture here to kind of outline the bolted steel tank construction to give you an idea of what that looks like. So on the lower left part of that slide, you can see the panels as they come. It comes as a little kit, basically. And those panels are already pre-coated and all the pieces and components show up on pallets and they bring them up to the site. Obviously, there is some concrete that has to be poured for the foundation and pipe penetrations and some field work that happens that would likely require improvements to your tank road in order to complete those. But certainly you don't have nearly as much as some of the other tank options. And you can also see it's built from the bottom up. They literally put it together and then it lifts itself. They jack it up as it goes until they get finished. So it's a really slick system. It's quick to put up, several weeks, and they'll have a tank up and put together. Okay. So then the last tank type to review, which is typically our favorite type of tank, is concrete. A concrete tank has the longest life and the lowest maintenance, and it's often thought to be the most aesthetically pleasing. It also comes with the highest price tag. And this particular location, it has a lot of challenges. A lot of concrete would be required to be brought up tight winding roads, which would be challenging. The construction footprint is challenging. They have to, put the tank together on site, which is challenging. And most concrete tanks that you find out there are wide and short. And that's because of the way they construct them. It's difficult to do taller tanks. It's possible, but it's not normal. And that's because there's only a certain height you can pour the wall before you have to put a cold joint in it and then pour it a little higher, which isn't really a preferable way to construct them. So it would be possible to do concrete, but certainly your tight site constraints, your difficult road, and the height that this tank needs to be makes it particularly expensive in your situation. And that's part of the reason I believe in the original IMEG master plan report, they had considered a few alternate tank locations, trying to find some place that it could be flatter and wider. So then we go into tank sizing considerations. So here's a whole list of different things that we looked at, short versus tall. Your existing Mesa tank has a diameter of 93 feet and a height of approximately 40 feet. The area on the site that's open and available to install a second tank is about 13 feet lower than the existing tank. So we would recommend, and your operation team would much prefer, that the maintained water elevation in the new tank match the old tank, which means your new tank needs to be taller than your existing tank, such that the water level is the exact same. Additionally, a smaller diameter footprint for the tank would be preferred in this location because it's a tight area, you know, and difficult to move equipment around the tank. So then we go into tank size and we think about how much volume is required. So this particular tank is defined by what role this tank is expected to fulfill when the existing tank is offline and undergoing repairs. So during the time that the existing tank is down, this new tank will provide fire flow, operational storage, and chlorine contact. So let's bounce through what those look like. So volume required. When you look at the existing demand, if we can move the slide one more, there we go. Existing demand of your system, that comes into play when we're looking at sizing. We didn't complete a full demand study, but I went through and looked at 1 year to determine how much water your system was using in a year, max day. Those types of metrics are listed there. On a side note, when I analyzed the demand over the past year, it did exceed the build out water demand in the 2017 master plan. So you're definitely increasing your water demand. Okay. So then when you think about fire flow, you go to the next slide. The fire flow should be defined by the fire department. That's typically what we see. In this area, typical would be a residential flow of 1,500 gallons a minute for a duration of 2 hours, and commercial for 3,500 gallons a minute for 3 hours. Now, the master plan put together higher numbers. Ultimately, the fire department should speak to that. I think that 3,500 gallons a minute for 3 hours would be adequate for this particular tank in a short-term solution as you repair the other. But of course, that does come into play on what you decide of how small you can actually make the tank, because you are going to be relying on it for fire flow during July, perhaps, you know, as you put that coating. Maybe you could do your coating in September, October and get off the peak a little bit. But if that coating takes longer to install or something, you could potentially be relying on it. The other thing to just note here is that too much volume can be a bad thing as well, because water age in your system can cause water quality degradation. So you don't want the tank to be too big either. So now let's talk about chlorine contact time. So what is chlorine contact time? After water leaves the water treatment plant, the CDPHE, which is the health department, requires that the treated water be in contact with chlorine for a certain amount of time before it can be delivered to consumers' taps, to ensure things that like Giardia never reach people's homes. Right now, the Mesa tank is one of the ways that this required chlorine contact is met. So if no other improvements are made to your system prior to putting this tank in service, when the existing tank is taken offline, you will have to meet that same requirement during that time period. The 13 feet of dead storage that we talked about due to the elevation difference and the volume stored for emergency fire flow, could be considered as part of your chlorine contact time, since it's unlikely that it would be utilized, especially the fire flow. So I've put on the screen there, fire flow, 1,500 gallons a minute for 2 hours, thinking of an absolute minimum. That accounts just for residential fire flow. An average day demand for operational equalization, which actually the CDPHE requires you at least have that much volume in a tank. And then wrapped up a total of 0.77 million gallons. This is the volume that would technically be possible, I guess I should say, from a chlorine residual standpoint. But in order to use that small of a tank, the chlorine residual in your water system would have to be increased temporarily. The water treatment plant would have to be online and operating perfectly, because any glitch in that operation would, of course, cause the risk of you being out of water. And the larger tank would just provide more time for your operations team to react to problems with the plant and provide better fire flow protection. So after we visited with your operations team, they requested the larger 1.5 million gallon tank be constructed.
So to clarify all of that, what Gwen identified was the minimums that need to be accounted for in the proposed new tank. So that's the minimum for us to meet all the requirements to the best of our ability with the assumptions and risks that means there's really no margin for any kind of hiccup or anything during water treatment plant operations.
It would also be particularly challenging, I think, to not have the max day demand stored in, if you ended up doing it in the warmer months when you had a higher demand, since you only have an average day. So then it becomes the number of hours you have before you have to get the plant back up and operating.
Excuse me, Councilor Wolf has a question, please.
Oh, can you explain? I understand that the new location being close to the existing tank is ideal. But at the same time, it creates all kinds of limitations and problems with constructing the ideal tank. Could you explain why at the very beginning of the slides, options 2 and 3 are not as preferable? Because all we've heard is that the location number 1 is really causing problems getting the ideal tank. So why did you still think that would be better than locations 2 and 3? In a simplistic way, so that we can try to understand.
Well, we didn't spend a lot of time investigating alternative tank locations because that wasn't specifically in our scope to review. I don't know if anyone else wants to speak to that. This is John McGinn. He's from our office, so he could probably speak to that. He has been working with the city of Manatee to do an overall water system planning.
Yeah, and you guys have heard from me before.
John, if you would give us your full name and title, please.
John McGinn, project manager, JDS Hydro. The other alternatives require a whole lot of additional yard piping and more complicated yard piping, as well as not offering the same elevation to max the overflow elevations of the tank, which is extremely important in our opinion for this tank going forward, and not just serving you during the period that you're using it for redundancy, but serving you as an extended, for over an extended period. Those other locations don't have the same elevation, and then they have by far the more complicating yard piping. So I did look at that. That group didn't, but our group did, and definitely the Mesa tank site makes more sense, even though the other sites have a lot of limitations as well, but Mesa's the right place to be. Probably why the tank's there to begin with.
And then an unrelated question, if we were to do some work to enlarge the path, the roadway, if you can call it a road, whatever it is, like a big trail for the vehicles, would that have any significant impact on on the cost? Because we've heard a few times about how challenging it would be for vehicles and a cement truck and so forth to get up there. Would that help at all, or is that just negligible?
Well, that's certain part of the cost that you've got to consider with the tank. You know, if you do a more difficult, thank you, John, a more difficult to construct tank like concrete, then you're going to have to ante up more costs for your tank road improvements. So I would put that all under the same umbrella or the same pot of money that you're going to have to spend.
And if money were no object, which obviously isn't the case, but if that were the case, which would be the ideal tank for us to build in your recommendation?
Boy, that's a tough question.
Or if it's between a couple of them, can you sort of narrow that down for us and help us? Because there's so many different elements here, but.
Quick question here, Gwen, maybe this question's premature. Did you have some
Oh.
other things you wanted to point out to us first, and then maybe you could walk us through the,
Okay.
you know, some consideration, because there's a nice decision matrix there, I think. So
There
if you-
is.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and if you could conclude, you know, go through and get to your, finish your presentation, let you finish your presentation, then we'll ask your questions of the ilk that Julie's pursuing. Okay.
Excellent. So yes, to your comment, Julie, there is a cost comparison and then a matrix. So let's do the cost comparison first. So based on our meeting with operations and the discussion of the tank volume of 1.5 million gallons and the diameter 70 feet with about 54 feet tall, so we could match overflows. We collected quotes from some various vendors for the different styles of tanks so that you guys could have at least some type of comparison between the options to help you from a financial standpoint. So that's what is noted here. I would caution that certainly the estimated cost there is excluding soft costs, and construction and steel prices are very volatile and change regularly. But we tried to give each vendor an apples to apples so that when you got the numbers, you could look at that. So let's flip to the next slide. So this is a decision matrix that we put together at Dole's request. And this kind of helps speak to what you're visiting about, in that we've got the tank cost there, the life cycle cost rated, the visual impact to the community, construction time, site access constraints, and we've rated them and then given a score to each tank. And you can see that there, the epoxy coated bolted is the least expensive. And like I said, additionally, there is the ease of construction on that particular site that does make it a bit more favorable. Aesthetically, the concrete tank, I think, would win, but in this case, like I said, you have some things really driving the price up for the installation of that tank. So the next slide is just a question slide. So we may want to bounce back to that matrix as the council kind of talks through the different options.
Okay. And Dole, did you have anything you wanted to add? Okay. Okay. So, council, I guess is a good time to ask questions. Julie, do you want to?
Oh, okay. So I'm guessing if money were no object, you'd recommend the glass fused epoxy bolted option? Is that a good guess, or?
What if money were no option, we would probably think that you would go with concrete. Simply because once you went to all the trouble to get it up there, you wouldn't have to worry about it again for a long time. And it would be more visually appealing. There is a lot of, like I said, challenges with that and a high price tag on it. But I do think that it has a fairly high benefit as well. You can see it's got a 20 and the other's got a 20.75.
And the concrete is, and I think the answer to this question is in a previous slide, but is the concrete is the one that would last the longest?
That's correct. Typically, a concrete tank does not require recoating. So you get away from that trouble of this constant recoating that you're having to do. And once it's constructed, it can stay into place up to 100 years.
And it's also not prone to leaks the way we have with some of the others. Is that correct?
Well, like the bolted steel has a lot of bolts, which means a lot of leak points. I guess I would have to say though that a concrete tank could leak too. I did have one at startup that had to be taken down and repaired. That's not typical, but it could happen.
Thank you.
Denise?
Yeah, I just want to remind a couple of things is remember, we do have some ARPA money, 1.3 about million, and Becca's here if we have financial questions. So we do have ARPA money to help with this. We are getting ready to meet with DOLA next week we submitted an application for 750,000. However, rarely do you get 750,000. If we get 500,000, that would be ideal. So we are meeting with them next week on Tuesday up on site. They'll do an executive summary and then we'll have to do a presentation to them probably in November. So there's some additional money there also. However, I do want to remind you that to repair the tank that we currently have is probably between 700 and 800,000. So if we can use money to help, the 1.3, et cetera, we need to go and try to be cost effective as possible so that we can keep the rates down as we move forward. There's also, as we've mentioned, some needs with the plant as we look at that. And then I want to introduce John Elwell, if he wants to come up and say anything. John is our new plant operator, Plant A. He has over 30 years of experience. He's one that has been instrumental in helping us really identify what the plant needs and move forward in a very strategic way and make sure that we're setting the priorities and moving in the right direction. He's now, I believe, our ORC or will be our ORC in the very near future. So I wanted to bring him up and introduce him too. So if you had questions or wanted to get his perspective, you could do such. The other thing is we do need a direction tonight so that I can take that to DOLA next week. I don't want to go to DOLA and say, council hasn't given us a direction, so I don't know which way we're going. I need that as we have those conversations. Thank you.
John, would you like to make comments?
Thank you, Council. Yeah, my name is John Elwell, the current ORC for the Manatee Springs Water Treatment Plant. Jeannie and I both worked with JDS Hydro on the proposal, and we were really glad to be a part of that and give our 2 cents because it's really important to the operations to have the tank sized correctly and built correctly for the operations. So we're open to several different, the construction type, I guess, doesn't matter as much to us, but we would love to be able to save some money and put that investment back in the plant in the future, because that's really going to be a high priority and a need right now.
Okay, thank you. Comments or questions by other council members? Let's see, Nancy, Judith, and then Julie.
Just in terms of the leakage, the epoxy coated bolted, you said is more prone to leakage, but concrete could as well. Seems like that would be really bad. But can you estimate how much leakage there is? Or we might expect, or is that just totally up in the air as well and dependent upon maintenance and catching the leaks, and you can correct that?
So the bolted steel tank typically does not leak. just as a clarification, as they put it together, one of the things that you have to do is pass a water tightness test where you measure the depth of water and make sure that it's not leaking. The same with the concrete tank. There may be some seepage at the bottom, but that would be atypical. And from the company that we quoted here, I put several epoxy bolted tanks into service, and we've had no issue with that. They really do a pretty good job. But to your comment of how you would repair it, there is methodology that you can repair. I would say the biggest challenge with like the glass fused tank is if you get a bullet hole in it, then you have to put something that doesn't look very pretty to cover it, where the epoxy may be a little more aesthetically pleasing to repair. I believe that you guys do have your ballast tank, which is a bolted steel tank that's on your raw water system. That operations, I don't know if you've had any trouble with that, if you want to speak to that, John, but you do have one in service now.
Yeah, no, I just misunderstood. I thought that it was more prone to leakage, but it doesn't sound like it is. So
And-
thank you.
Yes, and I think her
Which was
point
my
was,
biggest concern is.
It has more
it
potential.
has more potential. There's joints,
There's more bolts, that you're putting together. So if you have a leak and you have to check it, there's certainly the potential for it. Where with concrete, it's less of a potential. Thank you.
Great. Judith, you're next.
I wanted to say that I really appreciated the degree of content that you put in the packet. That was really helpful. I did have the same question regarding the bolts, because you did mention in the presentation that it is prone to more leaks, and maybe that's why it has a higher life cycle cost. But after reviewing what you presented it to us, I would take the glass fused epoxy bolted off the table. I would, A, for the cost, but B, if we can't recoat it, I have concerns about its life cycle. I would also take the concrete off the table because of the site. Now, you said it is more aesthetically pleasing, but that isn't an issue for me. We're talking about a water tank. It's going to be next to a water tank. It's a water tank and it's going to look like a water tank. So to me, for the price tag, so to me, in my calculus, I kind of narrowed it down to the epoxy coated bolted and the welded steel. And for me, the epoxy coated bolted was the winner. I guess my only question was, is that life cycle cost? I mean, it's 1.5 compared to 0.5 for the welded steel. Is that going to be, so you're saying that we're not going to get nickel dimed fixing leaks? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Our current, do you want to talk about our current one, which is basically what we have, and we have not been nickeled and dimed with that. And, the life cycle is pretty long. We haven't done a lot of repair. We do need to take it down to get it repaired now, but it's been minimal cost.
So for me, and thank you for how you prepared this, to me, the epoxy coated bolted tank is the clear winner, as you indicated.
To add to that, so we last recoated the existing Mesa tank in 1988. So it's been 34 years, if my math is right. And so that's how long it's lasted. It gets inspected frequently, but it's time to be done. So I mean, that we did get a lot of life cycle out of that one.
Julie?
I was just going to ask, I'm trying to put the numbers together in my head. So if the concrete tank will last us probably about 100 years and the epoxy coated bolted will last 60 to 70 years, as I understand your charts. But that way we're likely to have to recoat. Is there some estimated dollar amount we can consider when we're comparing these on what how frequently, or estimated how frequently we have to recoat and how much that might cost? So we can compare that to price per year over 65 years compared to the cost of concrete tank price per year over 100 years. And that way I can at least do my math and look at my numbers. I don't know if I asked my question in a clear way.
I don't have a life cycle analysis handy. That's something that could be completed. Typically, concrete does win over the epoxy bolted tank on a life cycle analysis like that.
In terms of cost per year average.
Now, having said that, I don't know if this is a typical location and a typical installation. When we visit with the concrete manufacturers, there's also a certain dimension where they can win when you do the life cycle analysis. I think that this tank being tall and on the top of a mountain like it is, that life cycle analysis would probably be harder for them to win. We could certainly run the numbers, but they really, when it's lower profile and wider, then I think you probably would have ultimately the concrete would be the choice. In this particular instance, though, I'm not sure if that's going to be the case here.
But to put numbers to the question, I think we're estimating it's going to cost $400-ish thousand to recoat the existing Mesa tank.
No, we have about 800,000 in the budget for in 2025, but it's going to be 700 to 800,000 is what we have. And now that could be different. The other thing to remember is if we go with the concrete, which is a little over 2 million, that's going to leave us about 400,000 shy that we're going to have to take a loan out, then another 700,000. So 1.2 million just to get the two tanks where they are doable. And we have no money to put into the treatment plant. Then we'll have to take another loan out for those.
Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah, I agree with Councilor Chandler. I think the epoxy coated bolted is the clear winner. And I would add to that by saying that 100 years is a long time. And I have no idea what water is going to look like in 100 years or the technology. So to me, 60 to 70 years is the trade-off for over $1 million is well worth it.
Thank you. And I took these slides and I passed them off to a friend of mine with a construction background. And he did what I thought he would do. He handed it off to another person to do the real work. So I had a retired structural engineer look this over for me. And his recommendations were either the epoxy coated bolted or the concrete D115. And there's two major schools of thought on that. And the epoxy coated bolted, I mean, it's inexpensive. It would give us, I think, good results. Concrete, his argument was that that's really when you're looking at longevity, that would be the 100-year solution. So he says, if you're thinking of your grandchildren or their children, the D115 is what you want to do. On the other hand, the epoxy coated bolted leaves us with money to bring the plant up to snuff, to refurbish our old tank, and I don't know if we'd have any left over. That's a Denise problem, but that would get us a little farther down the road. So I guess personally, I would lean towards the epoxy coated bolted. And the structural engineer did say that in his experience, he said it's actually the bolts that fatigue, and that's where the leaks arise. The fabricated ribs or staves, whatever you want to call them, he said those are pretty reliable. So that would be my 2 cents, the epoxy coated bolted. Council, let's just quickly go around the table. If you've got a favorite, let's just say it. Maybe we're close to giving direction.
I'm comfortable moving forward with the epoxy coated bolt. That's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is.
Same.
Okay, I'm with that. Nancy, you're good?
And just one more quick question with the epoxy coated bolted, if we were to go with that, we are looking, I'm hearing you say at starting installation in next year. Is that when we're moving forward with it?
That's probably more of a financing question, to be honest.
Yeah, we'll get the design going, then we have to get ordered, but depending on supply, we'd probably start late 2023 would be the goal. Have it done in 2024 and then start on the new one in 2025. And we'd really have to look at the months again. September is our highest month that we use the most water, even if you think July, but it's really September. So we'd look and see what months we can do this with. But that would be the goal is 2023, finish 2024, and then start 2025 with the next tank.
Okay. And Michelle?
I'm good.
You're good with the epoxy coated also. Okay.
Mayor, we need a motion and a second that I can take to DOLA. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, just one thing. I see Ann Nichols sitting there. Ann, you're kind of like the city's water guru. If you have 2 cents to add, this would be a good time to hear it. Okay. Okay. So, you're endorsing there. Okay, good. All right. Well, I'd entertain a motion.
I move to approve the epoxy coated bolted water tank at approximate cost of $818,000.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to second.
Can I have a friendly amendment to just add that it would be at the location number 1? I don't know if that will be important when DOLA and other people are looking at the proposal, but just so we're clear on where the tank would be.
That's fine. Yeah, you can have that.
I'm sorry, so that was the location number 1?
For one on the map, the one that's closest to the existing tank.
How about we state the recommended location that was done by staff?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, Dole?
Just because we talked about steel prices and bids are really volatile right now, maybe we don't want to put the estimated, in the motion, but that's just my.
I'd be fine with
that's right.
eliminating the price and just going with a motion to approve the epoxy coated bolted water tank in the location recommended.
And seconder, I think Nancy, I believe you seconded? Are you good with that? Okay. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, let's vote.
Six to zero in favor.
Okay, great. So I think you have what you need.
Thank you very much.
Did we get everything there, Denise?
We did, thank you. And we'll keep you apprised of prices, right now volatility, maybe they'll go down next year.
Oh, Denise, you said ARCA has given us 1.3. Can you tell us what that is?
That's the American Rescue money that we, about a year ago, you guys dedicated to this and we were hoping to move further. Then it was, 1.3 would do it all. We're just managing through it now and getting the designs done.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, that was a fairly intimidating slide set, but it was very well done, I think. I'd like to commend those of you who put that slide set together and also the structural engineer who kind of helped me. He said that was very well done. He's got 40 years experience, so good, thank you. Thank you, you're to be commended on that. Okay, we're down to that part of the evening for council correspondence, so. Do we have anything, Julie? Okay, Natalie? Nancy? Judith? Michelle?
As liaison for Para, we had our meeting last night and I am bringing back that they were very disappointed and feel discouraged with our most recent vote 2 weeks ago. And so I know they do want to meet with us. I spoke with Denise about them coming to a work session in January so we can hear where they're coming from and then where we're coming from.
Is this in regards to Soda Springs Park?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, this is in regards to Soda Springs Park. Skylar did not say the cost of the possible water feature, but that is $1 million minimum. And then along with the water feature is you're looking at, the possibility of a child getting hurt with having a water feature. So I wasn't told. It was just recommended that I come back to city council to let them know that they are discouraged. And we just have to remember that these are volunteers and they put a lot of hours into Soda Springs. I mean, and that was a great presentation. I was just like, I got chills just looking at the pictures of the possibilities. And so I also do, in our budget meeting, when Skylar spoke about moving forward for second phase 2, with the playground being the main focus. And then after that, we'll discuss the other things, but just wanted to let you guys know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess really the only thing I have, I've already mentioned, that's Indigenous Peoples Day this weekend. So It's been interesting trying to pull it together, but I think it's going to be a neat day. So 10 o'clock in front of the spa building, we're going to rededicate the Utes are going to rededicate the trail. 11 o'clock, 7-minute spring, bless the waters, basically, rededicate the springs. 1 o'clock, potluck in here. And the night before, Saturday night, 6 to 9, just a general gathering, a meet and greet. And I believe we'll have representation of at least seven Indian nations. So talked to a couple of the guys today. They were pretty excited. They're Apaches, and I think they were real happy. They finally got an RSVP from some Arapahoes. So sounds like a good time. Okay. City Administrator's report.
Just Roy's on vacation, so it's just me tonight, but I want to just thank all of you for Saturday. I think it was a very good meeting, and I appreciate all of your time, your commitment, and the questions, and just want to say thank you.
Great, and thank you to you. I think it was a real fruitful day. I think we learned a lot, saw a lot. We're able to have some good insights. Great. Okay, well, we have 2 executive sessions on tonight's agenda, so I'm going to ask for, I'll read the items, then I'll ask for a motion to go into executive session. First, an executive session to hold a conference with the city attorney for legal advice pursuant to Section 1C of the Manatee Springs Home Rule Charter concerning the Manatee Springs Urban Renewal Authority tax increment financing obligations. And the second, also an executive session to hold a conference with the city attorney for legal advice pursuant again to Section 5.1C Manatee Springs Home Rule Charter concerning a claim related to the tap fee required for 8 Rock Hill Road. So I'd entertain a motion. We have a motion.
Second.
A motion is second. Let's go ahead and vote.
Six to 0 in favor.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I guess we need a few minutes to transition over into executive session. We could take a 5-minute break. That sounds good. So why don't we come back at 8 o'clock for our executive session?